Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. Imagine the frustrations of spirits attempting to communicate with us mortals who are usually too busy to listen and look for their signs. However, sometimes that communication is in our faces and unmistakable, such as in these viewers' accounts. Steve shared an experience from 2003 in a town called Holtwhistle in England. He was in a relationship with a woman who lived there and would travel halfway across the country on nights and weekends for them to spend time together. One lovely sunny afternoon, they were sitting outside in the back garden, enjoying cold drinks and ice creams, while watching his partner's 3-year-old playing with her toys. After a short while, they heard the phone ringing inside the house, so his then girlfriend went in to answer it. It was a cordless phone, so Steve heard her answer the call and slowly walked back out into the back garden with it. He witnessed her say hello and start a conversation with someone on the other end, then watched as, soon after the conversation started, all the colour drained out of her face. Her voice quietened, as if in shock. Then after a few brief moments of conversation, she ended the call and sat down, looking mystified and confused. Steve's partner described that when she answered the phone, there was a bit of static on the line, and there was an older man's voice talking in a muffled way. At first, she couldn't make out what was being said and asked the caller to repeat himself a couple of times. The voice came through clearer, and she could eventually make out what was being said. However, what he said completely shocked her. The caller said that he was her Uncle Bobby, her father's brother, who had died a few years earlier from cancer, and that he wanted to let her know that she would be all right. He asked her to try not to worry about her eyesight. She had a degenerative eye condition that could eventually lead to her becoming blind or partially sighted. The caller said that everyone in the spirit world loved her and was looking out for her. He also said that he was concerned about and warned her about her father and his failing health. He asked her and the family to encourage him to get fit and cut out the cigarettes and alcohol, as he could be the next to die if he wasn't careful. Strangely, the phone battery, which had been fully charged prior to the call, completely died almost immediately after the call ended, and the phone felt very hot to the touch. Afterwards, the woman seemed shaken about the incident and said that she'd only met her uncle a handful of times when he was alive, due to him living a good distance away in the West Midlands. She found it hard to understand why he'd reach out to her after his death, and her father eventually did die of a massive heart attack a few years later due to his poor health. She never talked about the day afterwards, but it seared into both of their memories. Jodie used to belong to a group in Kansas City that investigated paranormal phenomena. She had once alone moved on a ghost in a neighbour's house. Electrical wiring in the basement and living room had been replaced twice but never worked. Then, moving on the spirit made them functional. Jodie had her own electrical experience when, on October 19, 2019, she turned on her television and found that the screen had turned pink. It had been perfectly fine the day before. She scrolled through the channels and they were all pink. She turned the TV off and back on, and it was still pink. Then she reset the cable box, but that didn't work either. She called the cable company and talked to a technician who tried sending a signal to her cable box and had her reset it again. The screen was still pink. Jodie then called a few electronics stores and spoke to the technicians, who said they'd never heard of this phenomenon before. The other technicians who worked with them had also never heard of it and were baffled as to what caused it or how to fix it. They really had no idea what to do other than buy a new TV. Well, the next day, Jodie's TV was back to normal, except for a glitch now and then when she changed channels. The glitches were gone by evening, and the screen has stayed normal ever since. Jodie then remembered that October 19th was her dear friend Jack's birthday. He had died of cancer 12 days before this occurrence, and she believed that he had played a joke on her to cheer her up. His brother and sister agreed, and they laughed about it as it was completely in character. Jack hadn't changed a bit. Gareth lives in Newcastle in the United Kingdom. He experienced a dream about his uncle who had passed away many years earlier. Gareth's initial feeling was that of flying, as often happens with lucid dreams, until he came across a restaurant along a beautiful coastline unfamiliar to him. In the dream, he then approached a middle-aged couple and asked if they had seen his uncle. The woman, whom he vividly remembers was in her 50s and with blonde hair, looked at her husband and said, "I think your uncle is at the baker's getting his pies and pasties." Moving on, Gareth went to another place which was like a derelict building, and again approached a scruffy-looking person, possibly homeless. He again asked, "Have you seen my uncle?" And the man replied, "No, you won't find him here, not on this level." In the last part of this bewildering experience, Gareth entered a house built of old-fashioned red bricks, and through the back door, which led into a kitchen with dark green walls. He sat at the table and looked up to see 4 figures, 3 women and a man, standing side by side, their faces dulled out. The man was heavily built and wearing an old 70s-style jumper and had jet black hair. Suddenly, in the eerie atmosphere, an older lady came in and started really shouting at Gareth, saying he shouldn't be there and to leave immediately. He woke up confused and wondering what the dream was all about. Then he contacted his mother, who was then living in Perth, Australia, and told her about the dream. His mother went silent when he mentioned about the bakers, and soon said that his late uncle loved his pies and pasty from a baker's called Carter's in the 80s. She told Gareth that the house he had described was her childhood home in Cullercoats, which is a coastal town and where she had grown up, but where Gareth had never been. The puzzlingly authentic aspect of Gareth's dream was that it contained real facts and places that he was completely unaware of. Dan, from Vancouver in Canada, also believes he received a message from a loved one in a dream. His granddad took him to Croatia in the early 1970s, but his granddad became sick and Dan had no idea just how ill he was. They were home for only about 2 months when his granddad passed away from cancer. Dan was only 13 at the time and beyond heartbroken, for the next 3 nights walking in his sleep. On the 4th night, it was like he received a gift from his granddad. He went to bed and fell asleep very quickly. In his dream, he found himself on North Hills Terrace, a road with houses on either side, on a winding decline that ended at Moccasin Trail. When Dan reached the intersection at the bottom, his granddad was there waiting for him. He was healthy-looking and fully clothed, except that he had no shoes or socks on. He took Dan's hand and they walked together. Dan can't remember if they talked, but he knew that his granddad was all right, that he loved Dan and knew that Dan loved him. It wasn't until Dan was older and worked in the morgue at a hospital in Toronto that he realised a significant authenticity of the message in the dream. He saw how the departed were cared for, how sometimes they were clothed, but not once did he see a deceased person with socks or shoes on. He still loves and misses his granddad and knows that they will meet again.